So going back to 2018, when you founded and hosted the Starty Pants podcast, to now, with being recently named the chair for the House Small Business Subcommittee for Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, it seems like you are naturally very drawn to entrepreneurs. Could you talk about where your passion for entrepreneurship and small businesses come from?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I mean, one, I often talk about this area, the Kansas City metro area, as being just this. I mean, we just have this like very vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem, and you just know from being around that, entrepreneurs, small businesses, really have the opportunity to thrive in this community. Just seeing how often like somebody just has like this great idea or a skill, and then they can turn that into a business or a service I just have always thought that was really cool. And then we also have like the diversity of businesses and diversity of business owners that we have here is, I think, pretty spectacular. And so when I was running, and then once I got into Congress, I knew that I wanted to be on the Small Business Committee because of that stuff. So.
And then I'm curious, in your current role as chair, what are some of your primary focuses as we're still dealing with effects of the COVID-19 pandemic?
In my role as the subcommittee chair, when it comes to things like capital access, these are some of the things that were really the hardest pieces for a lot of folks. So when we, stood up the Paycheck Protection Program, we needed to, we actually iterated on that and made sure that we were actually getting relief to the people who needed it. And then as we're moving forward, we're working on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, getting that, getting additional funding for that. And I think from my perspective on the Small Business Committee, we've just seen how much effort and attention should be paid to supporting our small businesses. Because if we're not, like, it can have pretty devastating impacts. And so I'm really glad that I'm just really glad that I am on that committee, because it gave me the opportunity to, in my conversations with small business owners all across the 3rd district, hearing the issues they were running into, particularly when the pandemic first started, and trying to figure out, well, what does the SBA want in terms of information, or what is the Treasury saying that we have to do, and really doing everything I could to try to help get those answers for people.
And I like that you touched on the Restaurant Revitalization Act and the current Replenishment Act that's going on. Could you let us know where that currently is at and why it is so important?
Yeah, I'm glad you said the Restaurant Revitalization Fund Replenishment Act. Maybe we should have some of our small businesses that focus on marketing help Congress with naming bills, so they're not such tongue twisters. But what we're talking about is a bipartisan effort, and I'm surprised I haven't mentioned this already, but when it comes to supporting small businesses, what, at least from the time that I've been in Congress, what I've seen is that we really see like the most bipartisanship happening when it comes to supporting our small businesses. So the Replenishment Act is a bipartisan effort. And I think that, that's really important to note, because we, when we talk about small business being the backbone of the economy, it's really important that helping to support that cuts across any kind of, political lines or whatever. So right now we're in a situation where we're waiting for the Senate to take up the Restaurant Revitalization Fund Replenishment Act. It's passed out of the House. And I can't say for certain on timing and that sort of thing, but I have heard rumblings of movement on the Senate side on that bill. So I'm feeling optimistic. I think that this is exactly the kind of legislation that we can see get passed into law.
So then, going off that, when it came to the Paycheck Protection Program, that was successfully replenished over the past couple of years. Were there any takeaways from that process that you're now bringing into the RRFP Replenishment Act?
It's really big that the SBA now has a whole, these whole new programs that are coming out of what's been going on with the pandemic. The Paycheck Protection Program was something that was a brand new program that the SBA took on, and it was, they were doing so much. They were, sending out so much more relief than they had ever done previously at the SBA, and in some ways that means that we being like Congress had to really take a lot of time to make sure, one, that the funds were going to the people that they were supposed to be going to. And I think we saw, a lot of us saw all those stories about, companies that were well connected or were actually not small businesses that were, able to get access to the PPP. And so in the second, go around, and as we were really iterating the Paycheck Protection Program, we, through conversations with small business owners and also with the lenders, this area has a lot of community banks. And then talking to the community development financial institutions, and folks who really have closer relationships with small business owners, and then small business owners who were saying, here's the uncertainty or red tape that we're running into. We were able to change some of the requirements in the Paycheck Protection Program, make sure that when it came to loan forgiveness, that there was a more streamlined process. And I think that going through all of that is going to help us as we are replenishing the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And then my hope is that we'll see improvements in various programs, because none of us wanted a pandemic or this kind of crisis, but there are some things that we're taking away from, that we're learning, that we're taking away from this. And I just look forward to us continuing to upgrade in some ways some of these programs, because there are a number of programs that have existed for a long time that really could use some upgrading.
I want to touch on the Women's Business Center and your recent visit, but also then you're currently trying to pass the Bipartisan Women's Business Center Improvement Act. Could you talk a little bit about how the cap raise on the grants in that act would help further the work of female entrepreneurs?
We just held this roundtable that was really, really enlightening. There were, a number of entrepreneurs and also a couple of people from the National Women's Business Center organization came to that roundtable as well. In some ways to celebrate the Kansas City Women's Business Center. And first of all, the Women's Business Center that we have here in our area is, they are able to help everybody in the state of Kansas. and also Kansas City, Missouri. And so just knowing how many people the Women's Business Center in our area is able to serve, the grant funding for that hasn't been increased in like decades. So, we should be making sure that a program that like the Women's Business Center program is funded properly, because the return on investment of supporting the women's business centers, the number of entrepreneurs that they help, the number of jobs that have been created because of the support of the businesses that are employing people. It's a great return on investment. Just recently on the Small Business Committee, we passed the Women's Business Center Improvement Act out of the committee with unanimous support. It's a bipartisan bill, and I'm hoping that we'll see that come to the floor of the House and not in the near future.
Of course, your time in Congress has been dominated by COVID-19. So I'm curious, what are some issues that haven't been addressed in regards to small business that you would have otherwise focused on if we didn't have this pandemic?
In some ways, highlighted the things that we should have been focusing on. I know a lot of businesses are really feeling this like workforce pinch. People are having a hard time finding folks to fill positions, and I think that that was an issue that in my first year pre-pandemic I was hearing about, but now we're hearing about it a lot more. And so in some ways it's maybe not what would we have been focusing on if it weren't for the pandemic, but maybe it's what's some of the stuff we should have been focusing on to begin with. And especially with I ended up introducing a bill called the Supplies Act, and portions of that have been integrated into different bills that really would help our small and medium-sized manufacturers. Of course, we just happen to have a lot of those here in the Kansas Third that could absolutely help. They can pivot. They can help with things like personal protective equipment, with medical supplies, and anybody who's in business knows that it can be hard sometimes to either scale up or completely pivot, even if you know that it's something that you want to do. There are a lot of steps there, and so I've been trying to figure out ways that we can help with that. And I think that it's hard to know if we would have been thinking about bringing a much more manufacturing back domestically if it weren't for the pandemic. And in some ways it's hard to imagine what we would have been thinking about were it not for the public health crisis that we found ourselves in.